It is the one, the only, the legendary Sid Salter. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Morning, Paul. How about you?
Good. Day by day, as we all are, that I Need a Favor song. It's resonated with a lot of people, especially today with everything going on from Ukraine to Hamas to the border and everything else, man. The other night, I woke up in the middle of the night, thought I heard sirens, and I understood it could not have been a tornado or anything, and I thought, okay, did the Chinese or the Russians decide to hit the nuclear button? And I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happened. But let me start off on a little bit brighter thing and note. We've got a big shebang going up with we're going to be over there. I say we are, the guys at Sports Talk, and also Gerard Gibbert coming up this week. So looking forward to that.
Well, we are too, and it's going to be a really interesting homecoming weekend for us, and we're looking forward to all of the activities and all of the alums returning.
Starkville is a poppin' place, the town, the city, and the university, and aside from whatever it doesn't really matter what the record is as far as any of the sports teams, but it's a happening place, and the guys are looking forward to being there. Let's talk about this election. What's your overview of it? Just less than a week out now.
I think it's obviously a tight race, and that is not something over the last 20, 25 years that has been much of a reality in Mississippi gubernatorial politics. The last time that it was this close was the last time that a Republican nominee lost the race, Mike Parker, against Ronnie Musgrove, and of course that was a couple of candidates within a fraction of 50% of the vote, and it of course went to the House. That law has been cleaned off the books, so and you have the complication of a third-party candidate dropping out of the race very late, too late to keep her name off the ballot. So a lot going on. The Trump endorsement yesterday, I think, will have an impact on the question of voter intensity. A recurring theme, as we saw in the U.S. House Speaker race, is sort of voter intensity. You've got people within your own party who disagree over policy points, and then consider withholding their support as a form of protest. And of course, in a tight race, that can certainly make a difference. I think the Trump endorsement, as it did 4 years ago for Governor Reeves, will have a salving effect on any Freedom Caucus Democrats who might, Republicans rather, who might be going down that road. I think it will help. I don't think it's a tremendous surprise to either side, but I think it will have an effect in helping focus Republican voters over, the actual choice before them. I thought Rebecca Staples yesterday had a very interesting take on this in a column she did for Magnolia Tribune, in which she says you're not just electing a governor, you're electing a government. And so I think that point, the Trump endorsement, I think all of those are positive. But make no mistake, Brandon Presley has run as good a race, for a Democratic candidate in Mississippi as we've seen since the Musgrove race. And, he's got the benefit of something that Jim Hood didn't have 4 years ago, the tremendous investment of his party at the national level, and the DGA and other groups, of course, a lot of outside money in this race as well. So Presley is very well positioned going into the race, and I think you've seen Governor Reeves, a lot of shoe leather and a lot of tire tread crisscrossing the state, and I think there's a general realization that this is a tight race. That said, as last time I wrote about this race, I said this. You're looking at a tight race, could be within, 4 points, 3 points, even 2 points. But Mississippi is still, by any reasonable measure, a majority Republican state. And so this is a turnout race. This is a race about voter intensity. And, of course, voters will have to make a determination over, A, the issues that move them, and B, how they classify themselves as Democrats or Republicans. And I think in this particular race, although it will be tight, I still have to think that, like the other 7 positions statewide, like the vast majority of the congressional delegation, like 75% of both houses of the legislature, that at the end of the day, the Republican candidate prevails. But it is certainly, as the pollsters like to say, within the margin of error. And so I think it is a tight race. I think people on both sides are highly motivated, and I think that's a real impact of the Trump endorsement is on voter intensity.
Wild card in here, then, is going to be the big elephant in the room is going to be the turnout, number one. Number two, explain a little bit on this third party. Now, she drops out of the race, and for people who are political watchers looking at this, and she's an African-American lady, then maybe that helps if her name is still on the ballot. That helps in one way, that some of the African-American who are traditionally Democrat would vote for her, and I guess those votes would be negated. But then again, she may have enough to cause this to go into a runoff. So will those votes will still be counted just because she's on the ballot?
Yes. They would be like a write-in vote. And so that would be counted. And, of course, if you're an incumbent, being kicked into a runoff is something you'd rather avoid. But I think you can sort of judge that from your own partisan perspective. If you're a Democrat, you think, well, any vote that's not for Tate Reeves is good. If you're a Republican, you say, well, it is like a write-in vote, and it's frankly kind of a wasted vote in terms of who eventually becomes governor. I tend to think that the confusion caused will fall on, as the Bible says about rain, on the just and the unjust. So I think there'll be confusion, and I think it will. It's just never helpful to clutter the ballot with people who aren't going to be there at the end of the fight.
Yeah.
So
I want to ask you when we come back, what do you think? Have people made up their minds yet? But as far as the third party thing and what will happen, as they say, we have a conundrum here. So we'll figure that one out later. Back with more and Sid Salter right after this. So Sid Salter, and continue this. In limited time we have here, we were talking about the independents and if there are any independents left. Do you think most people have made up their mind one way or the other, Sid?
Yeah, I really do. And of course, the polling has held pretty steady over the course of the race. And of course, you got folks that just don't like telling pollsters their business, and so there is an undecided showing up in polls. But I do think most people have made up their minds. And I do think on both sides, the Presley supporters and the supporters of Governor Reeves, it's a matter of do I care enough to go to the trouble to show up and vote? And so I think voter intensity is that, that equals turnout. So it's a turnout race, and voter intensity is the deciding factor. How much on fire am I for the candidate that I have already decided I favor?
We saw that enthusiasm drop dramatically. It wasn't that long ago when Trump was running in the last campaign that we saw lines, just historic lines. And that was one of the stories out there. Look at the people who are voting. and then it just dropped off after that as far as the state elections, and I'm not sure if it was all of the questions with the veracity of the election, what happened after that, but if the people don't get out any more than they have in the last couple of elections, statewide elections, it's not going to be good. I do want to ask you, though, do you think the Democrats are able to get their people to the polls as much as they were, 5 or 10 years ago from the days of the Barack Obama election with him and Biden? Do you think there's been some hesitancy of them caring as much about this as a racial thing anymore, or has that kind of mitigated itself to some degree?
I think that the Democratic Party, the value of picking off a Republican incumbent in a red state is very difficult to resist. I think that explains the money, and I think in Presley they had a good enough retail candidate that it was worth the investment that they've made in it. So, yeah, I think they believe they can do it. And in terms of, there's a lot of subject matter when you talk about getting people to the polls. Yes, I do think the Democrats in the old days, when I was young, had one pretty tried and true method of stimulating voter turnout. And I think now that you add modern communications and the internet into it, I think, yeah. And so I think either party can get this done. I think what you're seeing, the Trump endorsement, I think Republicans are doing everything they can to maximize their turnout. I think Democrats are doing the same thing. This is a tight race, but I still go back to the numbers, separate the emotion from it. Mississippi voters have performed pretty reliably as a red state, and it's hard to, people sometimes think politics is rainbows and unicorns. It's mostly math, and so I still think the numbers favor Governor Reeves, but I do think it is entirely possible that the Presley supporters can generate the kind of turnout necessary to either spur a runoff or to get to the finish line. So I think this is very much a turnout, voter intensity race, probably the most that we've seen since Musgrove Parker, and that did go to a runoff, and that did play out that way.
I don't disagree with you. I do wonder when people, and the people in this audience are very, very aware and educated as to exactly what's going on behind the scenes. But when you look at the people, 80% of the money that he is getting in comes from, I think, 3 areas: D.C., California, and Massachusetts. And when you start looking at some of the people that are financing this, 80% of this, in his pickup truck, the fuel in that tank is 80% of the fuel that's being purchased from out of state. Former governor candidate Stacey Abrams, whose racism has caused Atlanta a lot of jobs, caused Georgia a black eye. She's still trying to live down the calling her own state the worst state in the nation, and she's on the Brandon Presley team. God forbid she wins or he wins on this one, because she could come back maybe in the state she was born in and take a job as the head of an agency. I have no idea. But then he also has somebody in there called Robert Rabin, who is a lobbyist on the Rabin Group, which is a notable list of clients. His clients include Free Speech Coalition, the Trade Association of Pornography Industry, Bloomberg's gun control efforts, the Islamic Relief Worldwide, and a group that's been accused of funding Hamas. These are the people funding his campaign.
Well, you're going to, whoever wins, you're going to see, as I mentioned Rebecca Staples' column, you're going to see the governor that's chosen bring with them the government that candidate has chosen. And so those are the choices. I think it's easy to get wrapped up in personalities and who's most likable and all that. But, the fact of the matter is you're voting for the individual and the individuals that individual will bring with them to the task of governing. And, that's a choice voters have to make, and we're getting very close to that choice being at hand.
When you talk about the efficiency of state government, any time in any particular state, when you have a supermajority of Democrats and a Republican governor, or vice versa, supermajority of Republicans and a Democrat governor, what, in your experience, does this do for the overall efficiency of progress and solving problems?
It slows government down because you sort of have to add a layer of kabuki theater to the process, and it
wait a minute. I'm looking up kabuki there. All right, go ahead.
Well, you have a question before state government, and then if you have a Democrat governor, Republican legislature, the Republican legislature goes through the public gyrations of opposing the Democrat governor, and vice versa. Yeah. And so it's like theater, and that slows things down. It makes it more difficult, and it doesn't matter which party is outside of the legislative majority. It could be Democrat, It could be Republican. It slows it down, and so I think that's the biggest question. I think a lot of voters, if there are any actual undecided voters left in this race, that's the question. How effective can a Democratic governor be in the face of a really overwhelming Republican majority in the legislature? And that we have a weak governor system. That's the political science part of this. We have a weak governor system, and so the governor has most of his power. Never anybody better than Haley Barbour from the bully pulpit, molding and leading public opinion,
absolutely,
and managing his party. So I think that's where you are on that question.
Didn't we see some of this too? Even though the House and Senate were not where we are now as far as this Republican, it was beginning to kind of a transitory period under Ronnie Musgrove, where Musgrove would propose things that he knew that were going to be rejected, but it sounded good for the Democrat Party. These mean old Republicans and conservatives turned this down and that down.
It was less partisan during the Musgrove administration and more philosophical Republican liberal, but yes, you did see it. And the fact that the legislature is three-quarters Republican at this point will just intensify that effect.
Yeah, man, it's always good talking to you. I appreciate it so very much, and thanks for taking the time.
It's my pleasure. Good luck, Paul.
You got it, man. Nick Bain, House of Representative, outgoing chair of House Judd B. In the upcoming gubernatorial election, will continue this train of thought, and you'll want to hear a couple more people from the list of folks who are on the Brandon bandwagon that are far, far from Mississippi's faith, family, and flag. It's all